asynchronous function. This is a super advanced way to use and create a function. Let's go ahead and get into it. First, what we want to do is create a normal function using our function declaration here. And what we're going to call this is simulate async operation. And this is not going to be our asynchronous function yet, but it is going to be essential to using our asynchronous function. And now what we want to do is return a new promise here, because asynchronous functions in JavaScript are going to be promise based. Now what we want to do is specify resolve here, use our arrow function syntax followed by our curly braces, and then what we want to do is use our set timeout method here to actually delay this, because what we're doing here is we're simulating an asynchronous function here, but we're not actually pulling information from a API, for example. Normally that's what you would use an asynchronous function for in JavaScript. Now we want to add our parentheses followed by another set of parentheses, and then we want to use our arrow function syntax again followed by our brackets, and then we want to use our resolve method here followed by our parentheses again. And what we want to do in this specific case is actually delay our function by 4,000 milliseconds or 4 seconds. And what we need to do here is actually move this inside of our last parenthesis here, add a comma just before that followed by our semicolon here, and then for our sake we do need to remove ms here for milliseconds, but know that this is equivalent to 4 seconds. Now what we want to do is actually declare our async function, and the way to declare a asynchronous function is by simply typing async at the beginning of our function declaration. And now we're simply going to call this display string followed by our parentheses, just like a normal function declaration, then followed by our curly brackets. Now what we want to do here is console.log out a string that contains asynchronous operation started, so we can actually see this live in action once we finish this function. Now what we want to do is simulate our asynchronous operation using the await keyword by simply typing await. Then we want to call our simulate async operation function that we created up here just before this function that we are creating now. Then what we want to do is console.log async operation completed, displaying result. Again, this is going to make a lot more sense once we actually see this at work in our console. Now what we want to do is create a new constant variable called example, and we're going to make this equal to our output variable to display this on our page using inner HTML equals asynchronous function. And what we want to do is actually return our example variable that we just created. Now what we need to do is actually call our async function here, and to do that we're simply going to use a normal function call just like so. But now where it gets different is we're going to want to use .then, because again this is promise based, the asynchronous function is. And then what we want to do is type out our result, our arrow function syntax followed by our brackets, and then we want to display our result from this particular function. Now we're going to go ahead and hit save, and what I want to do here is I want to open my console here using inspect, going to console. So let's go ahead and try this out, and you're going to see async operation starting and our output's not there, but after 4 seconds our output does successfully appear as asynchronous function here, and then async operation completed, displaying result is successfully printed out to our console. Let me go ahead and refresh so you guys can see that one more time in action. It looks pretty cool and it is working great. So again, asynchronous functions are really useful if you're requesting something for a server or you're grabbing information from an API or something along those lines. And then the great thing about the asynchronous function is it is going to let the rest of the code continue to run while you're making that server request or requesting an object from an API or something along those lines. So that's really the major benefit behind using a asynchronous function like this, is that it lets the rest of the code on your page run while you're waiting for the rest of this code to successfully execute.
Click the card above to see what happens next.